Hello, today's video is about competing in NPC shows and how to choose what division are you. Question was based, it's not about whether you're physique or bodybuilding, that's looking at it the wrong way. That the bottom line is you should compete as many times the day of your show as possible. That, for example, let's say you're 40 years old and you're able to make light, heavy, and your weight for classic, and you've never competed before. That means you're eligible for true novice bodybuilding, bodybuilding, true novice classic, classic, and master's classic, and master's bodybuilding. That's 8 different divisions. You should do all 8, and this is why. Presentation is a skill similar to posing, but different from posing. That people are usually terrible presenters, that they're scared, they're confused, they're anxious, they're not comfortable on stage. And if you're uncomfortable, it's going to be uncomfortable to people to look at you. They're going to look at the person who's having a good time and has charisma or stage presence. So having stage presence is part of presentation. It's kind of a word soup, right? Where a lot of words mean the exact same thing, but people don't think they mean the same thing. And they do. So let's break it down. You're like 8 times in one day. That sounds exhausting. You just prep for 20 weeks and spend thousands of dollars to do the show, and then you're going to spend $150 on a tan and whatever, $300 on a hotel room, and then you're going to spend $120 on your registration and compete one time. And it's going to take you 8 years. So you could do it 8 times in one day and get more skill on stage than someone who took 8 years to do it if they did one show a year, one division each time they competed. That means that they'd be 48 years old by the time they had as much experience as you did your first time at 40. This applies to teens as well. If you're 18 years old and you can make it on stage 8 times, do it. Obviously, if you can do it 2 times, do it. Girls, it's even easier. They could compete in bikini. They could compete in wellness. They could compete in figure. They could compete in physique. They could pick 2 of the 3. They could pick all 3. They can do true novice, open, and people are like, oh, that sounds tiring. It's like, I don't give a fuck. The point is you're on stage, and by the 3rd, or even if it's your first show, by the 3rd or 4th time, you've been on stage more times than some of these women who've turned pro already. That you'll have better stage presentation by the end of your first day than your average girl will 2 or 3 years into her pro career. That once the novelty wears off the first day, let's say, you don't even care. You're just going out there, you're hitting your poses, you're smiling, you're waving, you're walking off. And, I don't know about you guys, but to me, it always made it easier because of how nervous and scared other people were. It didn't make me nervous, it made me the opposite. I was like, let me give you an example. My very first show, I took my clothes off for the weigh-in, and people made audible gasps that I was very conditioned. And I remember at the time, that night, someone came up to me and said, you know that dude over there that you thought might beat you? He's staring at you while you're posing, and he's convinced himself he's going to lose. And that pretty much was it. Like, he lost to me in his head in the locker room. It was over. Because if he felt like he can't win, he's not going to try as hard and squeeze his poses correctly and pose with the same precision on stage. I'm living in his head rent-free, right? So something I've always done is I pose backstage a lot. And that's my pump-up, is just posing. I do push-ups and I do band curls and stuff, but for the most part, where I get my pump is on the 3rd round of posing I look my best. So I'll pose a few times gently. When I'm in line, I'll pose. Then I'm still posing while everyone else is just standing there in line. So when I go out on stage, I'm not rusty, I'm lubricated, I'm ready to pose. Everybody's kind of still clunky. And obviously at the national level and the pro level, it's much more confusing than it is at the state level, because there's the 45-second routine, then there's your symmetry round, then there's you go out for comparisons, and you're putting the first call out based off of your 45-second routine and your symmetry round. So it's when exactly you peak matters. Now the other thing is how being on stage multiple times affects your peak. That you might flatten out in the middle of the comparison round. And then you might be sequentially flatter each time you're on stage. This is important to know about yourself, that I'm going to need 50 carbs and a liter of water over the span of the time that it takes between going out for classic and when I go out for bodybuilding. That being out there posing, or vice versa, if you're going out there for bodybuilding and you squeeze through 2 comparison rounds and you go backstage and you're flat, you should go out there slightly spilled over so that when you're going through your comparison rounds, you get harder and you get moved closer towards the middle rather than getting moved further out from the middle. This is important, and you only learn that by being on stage a long time. Like, I think in 2019 Masters Nationals, I was on stage, I think, 7 times. I was out for the over 40, over 35. Then I went back, that's a 45-second routine, symmetry round, comparison round, right? So prejudging, that was 6 times. Then you go back for the night show, and you're out for your posing routine and comparison, awards, overall. I was out 8 times. So I was on stage a total of 14 times that day. And I flattened out like a motherfucker by the time I got to over 35, pose down. That would have been useful to know. I might have placed much higher had I been carving up and hydrating into it rather than being depleted, because a lot of the belief is that you should come in as shredded as possible. And that's no longer the style. Right now it's about being as full as possible. You don't want to be spilled over, but it's better to be full and spilled over, especially if you still have striated glutes, than it is to be flat and you had striated glutes when you were full, but now that you're flat you do not, because the muscle's too loose, too soft, and then the skin just hangs there. And then the water leaves the muscle and fills the subcutaneous space. So this is important to know about yourself, that the actual presentation and posing endurance and managing your psyche and your emotions will affect your cortisol level and where the water is distributed in your body. If you're stressed, if you're feeling fear, the water will leave the muscles, will go under the skin. It's worse than if you gained fat by the minute. It really is. Furthermore, by being confident and at peace, people will automatically assume you know the future, that you are going to win, and so they lose in their head automatically. So that you can't fake confidence. Stupid people will buy arrogance as if it's confidence. Smart people will see through that. The only way to truly to look confident is to be confident. And the only way to be confident is to have the absence of insecurity. So by not being insecure in your glutes being striated, by not being insecure that you're flat, by not being insecure about being on stage naked in front of 1,000 people, by not being insecure about what the judges think, because you're on the stage so much, it's just comfortable. The other thing is, a lot of people will try to tell you to pick music that's going to be mainstream and audience friendly. Fuck that. You pick music that gets you excited. That whether I'm doing cardio and it's in a minor key or it's slow, I have a very hard time doing cardio. As soon as a song comes on that's in a major key or fast, I get supercharged and I'm super energetic and I want to pose. So if it's fast and dramatic and uplifting without it being cheesy, then I will pose better. And that's what matters, is transmitting that positive emotional energy into the audience. Then they will reflect that positive emotional energy back at you. And when you're in a comparison, that's important too, because you draw eyes based off of your charisma plus your presentation skills. And your body's important, but it's not, it's definitely the bottleneck is posing, presentation, and charisma. Doesn't matter how good your body is, doesn't matter how shredded you are. If you pose like shit or you don't believe in yourself, people won't really be paying attention to you. They'll be paying to the smiling person. And people can disagree. That's fine. Feel free to disagree in the comment section. This is my experience. You just show up the day of the show, enter as many divisions as you can get into and can afford, and you just get stage presence. Because what you might find out is you think your classic physique and you get fourth, and you didn't think your bodybuilding and you get first. It happens all the time. People are like, I'm going to do bikini, and they come in terrible in bikini, but they do great in wellness because their glutes are too big. The judges like them in wellness more. Or vice versa. That somebody thinks they're classic, but they've got a big waist. So they make the weight for classic, but they don't look classic. Ipso facto, they might be able to make the weight for bodybuilding and make the weight for classic, and they prefer bodybuilding, but they have a classic physique, so they won the overall in classic. It'll happen. It might happen to you. Definitely something to take into consideration, especially for new people. And that most of my content is geared towards pros and coaches. I don't even really consider what it's like to be someone who's starting out, because the sport was so different when I started out. We didn't have these opportunities. We actually had separate shows called novices. And my first show I won, so I could never do a novice. And we didn't even have true novice back then. We didn't have physique, and we didn't have classic. There was bodybuilding, there was open. That was it. And there was masters. But I was 30, so I couldn't do masters. So I got one shot per year to get on stage. And you had to not blow it. And that would never have happened. I could have built up enough stage presence in one show that it normally took me 5 or 6 years to accomplish, had I had the opportunities everyone does today. Like, subscribe. Even if you don't like this video, subscribe anyway and just set the notifications to nothing. But if you do like the video, ring the bell, share it with your friends, especially the ones that compete, especially the ones who think they know what division they are. It's critical information. I've never heard anyone give it before. Thanks.